What's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in, checking this out today. This is the new Upgraded Human Performance podcast with myself, Adam Kazwinner, aka Chef Kaz, aka Instructor Viajante. I think that's all my AKs. I don't know. Maybe they know me some other things out there, but I don't want to know. I don't. Those are probably not the best things. So basically, the format has changed, as you can see, guys. I was doing just an audio podcast, just kind of reflections and thoughts, performance, health, all things that I'm into. You guys kind of know, but I wanted to change it up, and I really wanted to feature some people that I follow and that I know and I respect and I learn from, to kind of bring those guys to those people to my audience, not just guys, also ladies. And so one of those is my friend Yuri Marmerstein.
Marmerstein.
Okay, mine's Kazwinner, Kazwiner. I get Siri says Kazwinner, so I just started saying Kazwinner. I like that better. But he's going to tell you a little bit more about what he does. But I know him as Juana Capoeirista, the He-Man, if you can see why he got that name. And then he's also really renowned for his work with handstands. I've seen these amazing photos and videos from performances, like one-arm handstand, like 5,000 onlookers below, up in the sky, like on a trapeze bar. He goes around the world and does handstand and movement, really, I think of it as, because, people see handstands, but people, when you do this for a while, you realize it's all connected forms of movement. It's just different things that the body can do. So if you wouldn't mind just kind of, I gave, a very simple introduction, but I'd like to hear how you see what you do.
I'm still figuring out myself. Honestly, I think I made a post about this recently where I try people who think I know something. I go around and teach to convince people that nobody knows anything. But I teach handstands, acrobatics, movement, whatever. I try to look at the bigger picture, so it's not so much, okay, the handstand is cool, but it's just one party trick with ideas of what can you learn about yourself from learning this movement that's not easy to learn, that might take you years to understand it or think you understand it, just to know that you don't actually understand it. So it's more so I'm using handstands, acrobatics, whatever movement as a tool for increased body awareness. So yeah, I teach seminars, stuff like that. I'm still trying to figure it out myself, so it's not like I know the answers. It's like I have my answers that are still evolving, that I'm still trying to figure out. But just using my experience to help other people with theirs and hopefully enjoy more of what it is to learn a physical art.
Very nice. And as you can see, we're being physical right now, both sitting on our balls. I've got the sand dune stepper below me here balancing me out. He's just using the ball as the weighted ball. I just got the regular plyo ball here. But, I want to get more into handstand stuff, but I want to first talk just a little bit about your journey, because I know you've told me about it a little bit before. You think you had a very unique story from what I remember about what your background was and then how you got into all this movement stuff.
I started just with backyard martial arts, so I wasn't like a gymnast. Yeah, I played soccer, I did some sports as a kid, C-team basketball, 7th grade, so nothing to any kind of high level, but just some variation. Wasn't super athletic. Towards the end of high school, I got into more of backyard martial arts, Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, some calisthenics, basic gymnastic type stuff. I read some old school strongman books that talked about handstand, that talked about physical culture, physical arts. In college, I got into capoeira by learning from a dance student who played a lot of Tekken. So that was interesting. And then basically what ended up happening is when he left, he had some family issues the second year, and I was the highest level student, which of course meant nothing. I had 1 year of which in any kind of long-term discipline. But I was the highest level student, so I tried to take over the club, and I tried to keep it going. And from there, just kept evolving, just got into different things, different ways to move and to use, to understand the physical body and to use it better. And it's always evolving. At one point I was just trying to learn different skills, and now it's I'm trying to see it as a wider picture about how it's not only about the skills, it's about I think so. I'm still trying to figure it out, but I guess, like you said, just connecting it, like, okay, at one point I thought handstand, this is what I want to do, this is what I'm going to train for 2-3 hours a day. And now it's, okay, I'm not training as much handstand, but I'm trying to see what connections has the handstand training made to other disciplines and how do they interact with each other. Or maybe they don't. Maybe the handstand is just a black hole that only gets you better at handstand. And then what's that connection of how much handstand can you train to still connect to other disciplines, and how much do you train that it can detract from other disciplines because of how much work you have to put into it. So it comes down to just learning things.
Yeah, that complex balance that as an athlete of any sort, right, or just someone who's looking to improve himself, right? Like even if we took the same conversation and applied it to business, or we applied it to accomplishment in any area, right? There's just this multifaceted process that, like, let's just say you went and worked on handstand, you figured one thing out. Well, in that training, the thing you figured out, do you then just focus on that one thing, or do you work on the other 9 out of 10 things that need to be figured out still? So it's an ongoing process. And so, I remember years ago you told me that you just decided to get a job at a gymnastics gym just so you could be around it all the time. And I really was impressed with it. So, like, what was the most impactful thing for you to go from basically being, like, as I see it, basically being like an amateur to being someone who's like, literally this is what you do, traveling around the world, giving lectures?
And even that was a many years process, because part of it was developing a perspective. And when I was learning it, like, now kids have it easy today, man. They got YouTube, they want to learn something, they type that shit into YouTube. That's what I do when I want to learn something, right? And it's amazing, to have that.
Yeah.
But one of the negatives is that it detracts from your own experimentation. It detracts from your own learning process. So then people want all this information, but they don't let it digest, and they don't develop their own perspective on the information. So that's number one, is developing your own perspective. And it's nothing you do will be unique unless it's already been done. Unless you're some genius inventor and you're inventing the first thing ever, you probably haven't invented anything. But the one thing you can have that's completely unique is a perspective you develop. So that would be number one, if anything. Get the skills, do the training, fail, but develop your own perspective on something so that what you say is unique to yourself. And then from there, how do you go from amateur to professional? You have to put in the work. I know my original thought was to actually move to LA to become a stuntman, and then one of the pieces of advice that I got was, well, you probably have to just go and work for free for 6 months, like, just so people know who you are. And I didn't do that, but part of it is just kind of putting your head down, doing the work, not having any expectation, and just, even if nothing comes out of that, no success, you have experience from it. So, like, let's say I'm teaching a class and only a couple people show up, and I was hoping for more, but they didn't. So would that be a failure? I don't know. To some degree, financially maybe, but at the same time, what lessons can I learn from that to get better at teaching? So it's like everything you do is an opportunity to get better at what you do, and you have to put in time with that. So it's like, right, like I mentioned, I coached gymnastics for a few years. So that was part of the perspective, is teaching kids, but also I was able to run experimentations like, okay, what methods work, what methods don't? How do I cue things better so people aren't confused? And with kids, the good thing is that they respond really fast, so you can kind of figure out what training works, because with adults, they respond so much slower. So that helped. Then with adults, it's not a carryover, so you have to learn how to almost speak a different language. So I don't know what I was answering, but it's definitely about, you have to get experience doing it to the point that you have a perspective and you have a reason why. So that's like, when I take a class, personally for myself, that's one thing that I like to see, is this is how we do something, and this is a reason why. That doesn't mean it's the ultimate right answer, but as opposed to, this is how I've always done it. This is how my coach taught me, and I was taught never to question it. So and that's that whole point of perspective, is that everything you do, you have a reason why you do it, and it's a logical reason. And it may, again, you may, like a gymnast sees a handstand very differently than a capoeirista sees a handstand, and those are two correct handstands within very different disciplines, but both have a clear reason why. What a handstand is that way because of the variables involved, and a gymnastics handstand is that way because of the different variables involved. And both would be wrong to each other. but both are correct within
the whole looking down and looking. I mean, I know that's probably just one thing, but that's like,
and
people
body
under
function
capoeira.
is one, right? Gymnasts have to be very tight because they're doing a handspring. There's a lot of force. You have to transmit force. Whereas in capoeira, someone might kick you. So you have to look, but you also have to be loose enough that you can react. And in gymnastics, you don't want to be loose because you're not going to be able to transmit force. And it's just one idea. And again, it's having a perspective. So a gymnast might see a capoeira master do a cartwheel with flexed feet and legs piked, and they'd be like, that was the worst cartwheel I've ever seen. The capoeira master is doing the cartwheel. They've been doing that cartwheel for 40 years, and they do it for a very specific reason, and that reason is not necessarily aesthetics. And if you've only spent time in one of those disciplines, for example, it's hard to see the other perspective. But that's what it comes down to, is being open and having, like I said, that's the one of the best kind of logic that I see in classes that I take is this is why we do something. It's not the ultimate right answer, but this is, in this particular scenario, this is why we teach this technique. And if you don't have that as a teacher, I think it's important to develop that, because it's, right? What if your student asks why? What if they ask, why do we do it this way?
Absolutely.
I think it's good to have an answer.
I agree with you. I like a lot of things you said. So you said that any opportunity to do something is basically an opportunity to improve at it. I really like that. And a lot of what you're saying also resonates with me in the culinary industry, because we have in the culinary industry what's called a stage, and it's when you go and work at a kitchen but you don't get paid. So like you were talking about being a stuntman, or even taking a job maybe like that you're overqualified for, but you learn a lot in teaching. Even just having the opportunity to have students brought to you, right? Like there's an opportunity in that. And then the other thing you were saying, almost indirectly, you were talking about how you like working with kids and how they absorb things differently than adults. And I think that one of the aspects where I really find some of my biggest growth and my best training sessions is when I just train like a kid, like where I can get into that zone where I'm just literally having fun. I don't feel like a lot of times I'll give myself like indefinite amounts of time to train, like especially in this space, I'll be like working and training kind of intermittently, and then I just
not have
get
a goal and
flow.
expectation, because it's good to have them, but sometimes like you see a kid mess around, do a cartwheel, they don't care. They don't care about their technique or how they land it, they're just doing it. And they're getting better at doing it by just doing it. And they're learning it subconsciously by not caring what happens.
There's that the childlike nature, right? Just to be joyful and free, and like how much more can we do when we're like that, right? When we're tight and we're constrained, and a lot of times it's hard to do things, and like fear even, right? Fear, I know I have some challenges with like fear of some stuff going backwards, right? Like even in the harness, like doing backhand springs, and so it's been something I've been working to overcome, but still a long ways to go.
Yeah, for sure. And it's about setting expectation and then not having them. It's good to have it sometimes, but if I don't meet it, then I'll just get more frustrated. And sometimes it's okay to not meet that expectation because you're learning how to get better at it. Like, with handstands, it's something sometimes people kick and they expect, okay, I'm kicking to try to hit the handstand. What if you kick just to kick? Just to see what happens, and through that exploration of kicking, you learn what it is to not kick far enough, what it is to kick too far, and then you have a better versatility of what it is to be there. Now, it's a little bit different doing a backflip because there is potential for injury, so that it's a different kind of story, and fear is... But the same thing with fear is, and this is something I learned a lot teaching kids as well, and teaching tumbling, is... You have to not allow yourself to think too much, and you have to, it's the same childlike mindset, but you have to put yourself in that mindset where you don't allow yourself to think about the consequences, because that's what's going to shut you down. And it's a very small window. So it's like, I'm using backflip as an example, but this is a really interesting one, because people think, okay, I'm thinking, I'm standing, I'm visualizing. If this is where I'm going, I don't want to visualize here. So because there's a moment, I see with this handstands, I see this with acrobatics. From the moment that you are about to start to the time that you do it, there's a very small window, and if you rush it, you're going to fail, and if you take too long, it's automatic guaranteed failure. So sometimes I watch people go into a handstand, and I see that just how they set up, if they take a couple seconds too long, I already know they're not going to hit it because they've already allowed themselves to think to the point of failure. So this is just one idea. Like, let's say I'm doing a handstand. Oh, there's shit inside here.
Yeah,
let's say I'm doing a handstand, or even a backflip, whatever. But this is my backflip spot, which means any technical work I'm doing here. I'm doing my arm swings. I'm doing my visualizations. All the thinking stuff I do here. When I do here, whatever, a couple breaths, and I go. So you have a separation between a thinking spot and a doing spot, because thinking is good to some degree, but the stuff that you're trying to do is more complicated than you can consciously calculate.
Stuff that you're trying to do is more complicated than you can consciously calculate. I like that. That's good shit.
So when you do it, you have to let the machine take over.
Yeah.
Because consciously, whatever, backflip using example, realistically it's over in less than a second, unless you jump really, really high. So how many things can you think about in that second? Probably just one, if you're lucky. So you focus on that one thing and you let everything else take care of itself, or not take care of itself, and then you learn a lesson from it.
Right.
But if you think, just learning to turn off that thinking part of the brain. Not that you shouldn't think, because I know for myself, I'm very much overly analytical. I spend way too much time thinking about stuff, and I have to train myself. I have trained myself, and sometimes I still have to continue training myself to turn off that thinking part of the brain and just kind of let the machine run itself and see what direction it takes. See where it wants to go.
Randomly taking my socks off. No, I love a lot of that. And again, this is what this podcast and the idea of this is all about. Is like you said to start off, is perspectives, right? Like that's the one thing. Like you know, like a handstand. Anybody can do a handstand, but everybody's perspective is going to be slightly different, just based on your body, on your experience up to that point, onto what physical training you've had, who taught you, where the surface you're learning on. So there's so many variables, and that's just with one, like the handstand. We're in this, I feel like, a culture where we revere the handstand now, and it's one thing, but there's when you become some sort of a movement artist or an athlete, you start to recognize I think just this infinite capacity, right? The person who can do the most things still can't do everything, right? The person who can do the most the most things gymnastics, and I think that me and you probably have similar approaches to training, where for more or less going to be mostly functional focused, right? So I'm not going into the gym seeing how much weight I can lift at this point in my life. Maybe when I was younger I did that. I'm not necessarily seeing how far I can run. So it's not a quantity thing. So when I say the most, different people, but I do think that even if you're a weight training, resistance training based athlete, or even if you're an endurance based athlete, there's still such great value in learning different modalities where you really are, a lot of it I find is just connecting with the body, right? It's just really, a lot of those other activities I named, you kind of almost want to zone out of your body, right? Long distance running, yes,
people say
awareness.
There's a level of mindfulness where you can be completely mindless, and I think that's actually the highest level of mindfulness. Sure. Is where you can do something without any conscious thought or awareness.
Yeah.
Now it takes a lot of awareness to build up to having no awareness, but and right, like you said, it's. I've been there too. The quantifiable element of I want to lift this much, I want to do this many reps, and I'm a lot less interested in it these days. I'm a lot more interested in how I feel. And if I'm lifting weights, I'm going to try to lift the least amount of weights. So how can I do this exercise so I can get the same benefit and the same tension from lifting less weight, because I don't have to waste all that time putting plates on the bar, and then because I'm not doing it to say how much I can lift. And that's the difference, is what are you doing it for? If you're doing it just for general self-improvement, it doesn't matter how much weight you put up on the bar. Yeah, sometimes it's good to have goals, but ultimately it's whether you squat 400 or 225, that only matters to the people who care about how much you squat. Right. Body doesn't care how much you squat.
Sure.
But it does care that you get stronger and that you train in different ways.
Nice. So and I want to get more into maybe what we can call, your basics. He does full seminars. Please attend his seminars. He'll be having some in Las Vegas coming up soon and around the world. But I want to get more into that stuff in a second. But I also want to ask you real quick, what do you do about your nutrition? What's your nutrition profile like?
It's not. I don't do a diet that has a name. I try to cook for myself as much as I can, and I try to source my ingredients as much as I can. So like I bake my own bread. I don't grow my own vegetables. I grow a couple herbs, stuff like that. I think that if I get into super basics, just learning to cook for yourself and putting the work into it, it makes you enjoy your food, and then also you're more likely to have better quality food because you actually know what goes into it. Other than that, I keep it because I travel so much, it can't be too strict, and I think it's also just for the purpose of versatility. And if you look into ancestral diet, you can't be too strict because it's like, for a while I was paleo and I wasn't eating bread, and then my grandparents who grew up under, in Stalin era Ukraine, they were like, how can you not eat bread? Like, this is, and that's because it's all they had at the time. So also just understanding that perspective of, number one, not being too picky, number two, being able to still extract nutrition, number three, sometimes eating like shit. Obviously, if you eat like shit all the time, you're going to feel like shit. But once in a while, just to remind yourself, like, oh, that's why I have the diet that I do, because I don't feel good after eating this thing that I probably shouldn't have eaten. But who knows? Maybe it was still worth it. Maybe it was delicious.
Right.
So, yeah, for me, not to be too strict. I don't count calories. I have a general awareness of macros I eat. I generally eat a higher fat, kind of medium protein, medium carb. Typically don't do breakfast. Typically do coffee. And then I'll eat like a pretty big lunch and a pretty big dinner.
You have any special coffee routine or recipe?
Oh yeah, I just started getting into the fancy coffee, so I have a fully manual espresso maker. So I weigh the coffee and I grind it and I prepare everything, and I have a whole ritual that I do.
I think people who are into coffee tend to get sometimes really, really, and it's especially a lot
it's complicated, and it's that same learning and it's that same failure. It took me a week to learn how to pull a shot with this machine. Because I just kept failing, and then I had to upgrade the grinder, and then I had to calibrate the grinder. And then what was interesting is with the same coffee beans, I took them with me to Australia, and I had an Airbnb host who had a pretty nice espresso machine, and I put the beans through his machine, and it tasted completely different, even though it was the same beans made with the same style. And then you start to realize that it's complex. And then, in some countries, baristas have to go to school for a month to learn. So and then my roommate does the opposite. He just has a machine where he presses the button. He puts the grounds in and he presses the button. He makes fun of me for putting the work in. But I like that because then I appreciate it. Yeah.
We all got to have our ways that we fill up the 24 hours, right?
And that idea of learning something new, I think coming back to what we talked about a few minutes ago is, I think if you fail at something, that's a huge opportunity and you have to embrace that. And the easiest thing to do is once you get decent at something is you just keep doing it because you're already good at it. And then just to find something like, okay, I don't understand this and I completely fail, learning how to not fail, not necessarily to get good because that doesn't matter. But learning how to not fail at something, that's really valuable. And you can do that with anything. It doesn't matter what. You can pick a movement, coffee, making bread, whatever.
So what do you mean by that? Learning how to not fail?
And what it comes down to is understanding your own learning process. So let's say with the coffee, for example, okay, what are the variables? I have the grind, I have the tamping, I have how hard I press, and then what are the variables in the coffee that comes out. So just understanding the process enough that you can make adjustments. So in the handstand kick, okay, you can kick too far, you can kick not enough, you can have your shoulders in a position where they're shifting your weight, and then what it is understanding how to catch those mistakes without somebody telling you. So when I taught kids gymnastics, I don't care if they take first place and they have a ribbon to take home. For me, that doesn't matter. But when, for example, when they start to catch their own mistakes without a coach telling them, that means they actually are training themselves how to learn. So that to me was a huge breakthrough, much bigger than, oh, I did this flip, okay, cool. Like, oh, I did this thing wrong that you explained before, and now I understand how to feel the difference. That's permanent. That's like a permanent change to your learning process. And then the more things you learn, the better you get at learning. You still have to suck at something new, but when you suck at something new And it's good also to have things that are completely unrelated to what you do. So like, that's why I like for me coffee and bread making, because it's completely unrelated to the stuff that I normally do. And I think that's important too, is to kind of branch out and not do the same thing all the time. And again, it's all skills. And at one point in my life, maybe I judged people based on their athletic skills. And there's so many other skills. There's so much you can do. Like okay, let's say a friend of mine, very high level acrobat, like can do all of these so many crazy high level skills, and to do high level skills in that many disciplines for one person is amazing. And then he can't cook a meal, so there's no negativity in that. It's just what you spend your time on, and ultimately you can't do everything.
And I think that also a lot of it, you kind of get to a point. At least I feel like I got to a point. I got to a certain point, and I see it amongst other people where a lot of it's like we're talking a lot of physical development stuff, but really a lot of it comes down to brain development, right? Absolutely. Like all of these things, people think like brain, books or brain, like intelligence, and it's like really everything in some way, shape, or form is you don't have to tell your heart to beat. You don't have to be like, I'm going to get better at my heart beating. I mean, that's kind of a byproduct of physical training is your heart does actually get stronger. Things like that. But a lot of this is, like you were talking about learning and the process of learning and improving at learning. One of the big ones for me was when I learned my first second language, and I was one of those people that I always said, I'm not good at
that
learning
makes
languages.
Permanent changes because it never turns off. That like languages are super interesting because it's like that part of your brain. It's not like you turn it on and off. It's like now you always understand that language, and now your brain is running on a whole nother level because of changes you've made to it. Now it's super interesting.
Yeah, you just kind of like learn it. Like you're lighting up entire areas of your brain, and then the byproducts of that, which have ripple effects in other areas of your life. So I want to know who are you like following right now? What YouTube pages do you watch? What do you recommend to people who work with you? Stuff that just like you can get excited about.
Oh, I don't even know. There's so many, and then at the same time, nothing comes to mind. I'm trying to think.
Or what's the last thing that you watched, read, or listened to that really made an impact on you? What was it about?
That's also a hard one. Because I can extrapolate a lesson from everything. I try to anyway.
We're hitting them with the surprise questions here. We're coming with spontaneity.
I'm drawing a blank. This wouldn't have been recent, but it was a video from my roommate subscribes to the Kojo's Trick Lab, which is like a bunch of tricking philosophy videos. Not philosophy, but a lot of tutorial. And this wasn't super recent, but it was just the first thing that comes to mind for me. Sure. And it kind of goes back to that previous conversation we had a few minutes ago, where it was a video on one trick, right? Like, not a tutorial necessarily, and then it would take 5 different people who all do that trick differently and analyze all of their techniques and how they work, and they would all be different techniques. And I thought that was a really cool concept, is instead of saying, okay, this is what you have to do, like, here's 5 people who are really successful with this in different ways. And then through that information, you can maybe choose. And that helped me a lot because then later I was going into this trick and there was one particular cue that I wasn't doing that I learned from that video because one of the people was doing it more similar to what I was doing it. So to me, and I haven't watched a lot of the videos on that account, but like that
JoJo's Trick Lab? Kojo. C-O?
K-O.
K-O-J-O.
But that concept was really cool that he would do that and that he would, not to say, this is the way.
Right. But usually it's just the narrator themselves or them with showing it by their,
And it's just good, especially in the fitness world. It's the easiest thing to say, like, this is the way. If you follow this diet, you're going to have abs like me. If you follow this workout that I don't even do, you're going to look like me.
Right.
And it's just cool that somebody appreciates the variables and understands that no 2 people are going to get the same results from the same workout, the same method, but you can learn from other people's successes and failures, and then you can figure out your own way to learn something.
All right. So with that said, that no 2 people are the same, and there's no template for everybody. Now I'm going to ask you to give us a little bit of a template. So of course, right, the counter nature of things. But just if there's like, I mean, there's one cop with Marmerstein, and I really respect just him as a physical specimen, and of course the physicalness also has the intelligence quotient to go with it, right? I call it like your physical intelligence. I think about developing your physical intelligence is just as, if not more important than developing your physical fitness. And actually the best way to get more fit is by developing your physical intelligence, because you can probably get a lot of the results you might be trying to get at the gym or doing what you're currently doing a lot more quickly, a lot more easily, and your body will actually be more functional for it. Like, you can actually use it instead of being in pain. Like, I love when I see people's like freaking, oh, I did legs yesterday, I can't walk for 3 days. I'm like, you shouldn't feel like that.
No, yeah, absolutely. It's like they get obsessed, or it's like some badge of honor that they're constantly injured. Like, okay, you can do cool skills, that's amazing, but then long term, is it worth it? Maybe if you're LeBron and you're getting paid $50 million a year and you're destroying your body, maybe it's worth it, because with that amount of money you can just buy a cyborg body. But yeah, it's the same idea. Like, is it worth it? Should you feel like, I was at a CrossFit a few years ago, nothing against CrossFit, but sometimes that mentality. And I was doing some skills on rings, and then some girl walked up to me after class and like, oh, it's really cool that you're working on skills. Like, okay, like, you can work on skills. There's nothing like, there's no law that says that you can't do that.
How do you mean? I don't. What versus what?
Like, getting better at stuff versus getting a workout. So a skill and a workout is a different thing.
Yes.
And a skill session, even if it's a physical skill, it doesn't have to. So I can do a handstand session to failure where my shoulders are destroyed. I can't train for the next couple days, or I can stop before I fail. And let's say I work only technique.
Right.
I can do it and still feel good afterwards and still be able to train something else. And it's this idea of working the skill versus working the physical portion of the skill. And so, for example, like CrossFit is an example where they train more to failure. They train more to feel, not necessarily to feel tired. And there is an adaptation that happens to that as well. But I think it's understanding how to draw that line. So like archery would be a good example as an analogy. So I have 3, it's more complicated, of course, than 3, but I have 3 basic principles. I have the strength it takes to pull the bow back. If I can't pull the bow back, I can't shoot it. Okay. Then I have the consistency with pulling it back in the same place and shooting, and then I have the aiming. So the physical portion would be, I could just do rows a shitload of times, and it might make me better at archery, but once I'm strong enough to pull the bow back, I don't really need to work on the physical element. If I just work on aiming, or if I just work on shooting consistency, it doesn't have to be necessarily physical. Yeah. So the point is, if my arm is tired at the end of the session, that doesn't mean I had a productive session. That means my arm was tired. Yeah. If I actually got better at aiming and I got my grouping closer, that means I actually had a productive session. So it's this idea that you don't have to feel like death in order to have done something useful. And even the same with the physical practice. Like, yeah, once in a while it's good to push yourself so you know your limits and you can make certain adaptations. But that doesn't mean that you can't get a workout for 15 minutes. You feel good after that 15 minutes. You don't have to keep going until you're dead. Yeah. And that's good, especially if you have a busy
that's also
schedule.
where injury happens a lot too,
absolutely.
Right? When people get overly fatigued. And, I know I've had those moments when I was running purely on freaking adrenaline. And I had already felt something. Like, it happened to me in jiu-jitsu once when I was in college, where my thumb got caught in the guy's gi. And I was like, just, 22 years old, full of fucking testosterone. And I was just fired up, and I just kept training through it. I even, at the end of class, I remember I did like the rope climb. And the next day, I couldn't pick up a pencil. I couldn't tie my shoe. And, that's a very small joint, small articulation. But it's happening all the time. I see it, like, I'll go to the gym, and, like, somebody's, their entire workout, they're like this. Like, they're rubbing their shoulder, and then they go and do a set of bench press, and I just want to go up to those people, and that's a big purpose of this podcast too, right? So it's like, I want to share people's their perspectives and their ideologies and the system that they follow and what works for them, but I also really want to help people avoid a lot of mistakes, right? Like, I used to, lift 2-3 hours a day till I remember I would shower after I'd work out, and I couldn't wash my hair because I couldn't lift my arms.
So this idea of functional, like, okay, you train legs, you can't walk for the next 2 days. What if you have to do something that involves your legs? So it's like, do you want to train to that capacity where every time you train you're incapacitated? for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thought. Again, there are certain adaptations to the body that have to happen if you want them to happen with more maximal loads, but hey, it just depends. There's no wrong answer.
No, absolutely. And it's a lot of the culture stuff, right? Like, so I think about how when I got into like a lot of this stuff, you know, it was because of my dad, and he was a big follower of like Arnold, right? And like, you know, back in like the 90s, everybody wanted to look like Arnold or WWE, and that was seen as strength. That was seen as fitness. I think we've come a long way from that. I think there's a lot of factors that have influenced that, and you know, people like yourself, the work that you're doing, you're really helping bring awareness to some of these things. So what are some of the, you know, basic movements? I was starting to talk about a Messer who's a friend of mine that he showed me. He was, you know, I said, what's one thing? He was in a workshop, and I said, what's one movement that you would recommend just to do every day? You could just pick one. And he recommended, you know, the flat-footed, just little baby squat here.
Yeah.
So I, you know, it wasn't to say I didn't do it before. I did it, but now I do it pretty much every day. You know, it's kind of like a go-to position for me. So what are some maybe that you would recommend, and like you said before, why?
Yeah, so this is more of a concept than necessarily one movement or position. And the idea is that it's an open concept, so you can make it as challenging as you need to. And it's just this idea of interfacing. So I go to the floor, and then I stand back up. And this could be as simple or as complex as you need it to. And there's no wrong answers. There's no right or wrong. It's just this idea that I can interface with the floor, and you can turn that into a workout. It can be a cardio, it can be strength, I can put handstands in it, I can do whatever I need to make it challenging. Or maybe just a basic for, let's say, someone who's elderly, maybe just doing this is already the workout, and there's nothing wrong with that, but because it's going to teach you how to fall. It's going to teach you kind of to go against that Western lifestyle where it's like everything is a chair. So I'm here, I sit in a chair, I get up, I never actually spend time on the floor. So just understanding, so that would be number one, just understanding the floor is there and try to interface with it in a way that's not clunky. So you learn how to absorb. There's a lot of methodology behind that. I'm still learning. I can talk for hours, but just avoiding how to avoid impact, and and that's like one of the first things I do if I'm flying or if I have to spend a lot of time seated.
Yeah.
It's the first thing. I walk to my Airbnb, open space, I just lay on the floor.
Yeah.
I roll around a little bit.
Yeah.
So that would be number one, and these are concepts.
Yeah.
Number two would be just understanding movement exploration. So it's like everybody's so obsessed with this is the movement, this is sets and reps, how many do I do? Which can be valuable as well, but this idea that just find a position and then explore it. So the squat, just spending time is good as well, but then once you can do it, like how can I do it differently? How many ways can I play around with the movement, do it differently, maybe feel something different, maybe find a restriction that I didn't have before? So this idea of a movement exploration, and it could be in a specific position. Like it could be in a pancake on the floor, so people want to stay here, which is fine. But just moving around gives you a better understanding, versatility of it. And again, it's this idea that nothing is wrong, just moving and just exploring and finding different ways to move. Or it could be anything. I'm trying to find different examples. So now I'm in a knee lunge, right? So same thing. I don't have a set sequence necessarily that I'm following. It's just like, okay, this stretch feels interesting right now, so I'm going to stay there for a minute. So it's this idea, and people ask, always about what's a stretching routine. And it's good to have a routine, to have specific goals, but I think to incorporate it in your lifestyle, just to have this idea that, okay, I'm standing, but I can stand in different ways, and then I can have this standing exploration where it allows me to explore my flexibility, it allows me to build strength in different positions. So I guess it comes down to this idea of find ways to not sit still.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. That's like, as you can see in my space here, and as I was saying earlier, this is, I work and move like simultaneously.
Yeah, and that lifestyle, it's so good to have that, and that's like, I have something similar. just understanding that you have this opportunity. So I'm sitting, I'm doing some work. I can take 5 minutes and roll around on the floor in between work. And maybe it's not something you can do in an office, but you can still find ways.
Yeah.
I can be sitting in my office chair, depending on how conspicuous I want to be. Okay, I'm sitting in my office chair, I'm typing. Maybe I can do some stretches in my chair. Maybe I can do a chest workout like this by pushing my hands towards each other. I can do a shoulder workout. I can do bicep curls. And I can do this shit in my chair. Oh, so my back is tight, I'm too round. I can do extensions. If I have a back to a chair, I can push with my neck. So there's no excuse. I can be as creative as I need to. And even like, you might annoy some people if they're next to you, but I don't have to be bouncing up and down in my office chair. So even like sitting in the chair working, I can still find different ways to move instead of just being locked down. And I think a lot of people miss that because they want to know what's the routine, what's the stretch to do. The stretch to do doesn't matter because it's different for everyone. It's this idea that you find ways to move and then you find ways to not lock yourself down in the same position because ultimately your body adapts to what it does more of. So it's not so much that sitting is bad. Sitting by itself isn't evil, but when you sit in the same position for 8 hours a day for 20 years, then your body adapts to sitting. That's why it has that negative.
And even on the going back to the brain aspect that we're talking about, the neural pathways, right? That just like you're conditioning yourself to stay still. I think about it a lot with the kitchen. I tell people all the time, working in the kitchen, probably the most miserable thing about it is standing on your feet for 5, 6, 7 hours, and people think, oh, well, we're designed to stand up, and it's like, yes, we're designed to stand up and move. We're not designed just to stand in one place. That's why it feels so awkward. That's why when you're in line or something, like it's really hard not to be fidgety because we're not, like think about it if we were in nature, right? Like if you're standing still, you're just a target. You're just an easy target, right? There's no reason that we'd have to do that. So thinking about, going back into and just kind of reverse engineering our bodies and what we do with them on a daily basis and saying, what are we doing that's causing, a certain effects. And then there's the other end of the spectrum as well, of course, where if you're training, you're also going to be, you don't have to necessarily get injured, but you're giving, you're not putting yourself at risk, but you have to some extent push boundaries too, right? In order to really maximize, what you can do with, like to do a one-handed handstand, probably going to have to start with a two-handed handstand, right? It's going to be a lot harder to learn just going right into a one-handed or one-handed cartwheel, right? It's a lot easier to start with a two-handed cartwheel. So I think that's one of the other interesting aspects about all this is that continuously pushing the edge. Like that's the one thing about people who like to learn and grow is there's no, like you said, there's no final point. There's no like, I got this medal, I'm done. It's the nature of your character, it's the nature of your personality that seeks out that growth. I like connecting with people who think like that because not everyone does, right? And I like I said, I am aiming to bring this somewhat to the masses. Now, I want to get back to the handstand stuff a little bit more. We'll wrap up shortly, but I also want to talk because I think that just like people who might be into cooking and might be into movement, this also can appeal to people. I believe people who are into business, right? I think you see a lot of more modern, for lack of a better way of putting it, or entrepreneurs, like real entrepreneurs, that meaning that they actually live off the money. Like you can be working on it, right? You can have your entrepreneur thing can be your side hustle while you're making money, or even unemployed. Like I'm not going to be mad at you, but don't call yourself an entrepreneur if you're not like really trying to make a business or making money, from something you created. But that being said, a lot of those types of people also tune into this because they may be doing some of these things themselves, but also you are a business owner. I am a business owner, and you've built this to now where you can travel around the world and give workshops, teach others to do with some of the things that you learned. So can you just talk about that? What that life is like? What some of the things you learned, and just any lessons that you can share with us.
It's a lot more difficult than it seems on the internet. It always is. So I get a lot of questions like, oh, I want to do workshops. Like, okay, cool. And then when they learn how much more it actually takes than what I present. So first of all, I guess just understanding that it never ends. It's not like, so the difference, okay, you work 9 to 5, you work for somebody, which can be a good or bad thing. I don't like working for somebody. I like to know that If I make a mistake, I take the consequence. If I do well, I get the reward. I like that feedback because it lets me get better. But at the same time, there's no, like, you don't clock out. It's not like, okay, I'm done with work for the day, now I can free my mind. It's like,
it's
no,
Christmas and
right?
New Year's.
It's Sunday night, and I'm still sending emails to try to organize travel on 3 different continents because they're in different time zones. So it's not, and if I take a few days off, then it piles up. So that's one important thing that people don't realize. When you're self-employed, you work for yourself, it's always on. So it's like you live what you do. What else?
Well, just like tips or lessons that, if you could go back and again, taking out the physical part of it for a second, but just things that you would share with yourself. What's helped you be successful? Because I'm sure there's other people, not just your work ethic, right? I'm sure that's part of it, but I'm sure there's other people who've wanted to travel the world teaching things that have not been successful in it. What have you done that you feel like has got you, that you can actually do that for your life?
So 1 is developing a perspective. 2 is sharing that perspective. So like I put out a lot of free content. I still do. I have paid content, but I know there was a point where I wanted to learn. There were no seminars. If there were, I was a college student, so I probably couldn't afford them anyway. So how can I help people to learn the things that I wanted to learn so that they can do better than me? So this idea of not just having this mysterious product, but like, hey, I'm providing, and if you want to support me, I appreciate that. But at the same time, here's a bunch of free shit. And I'm not trying to be pretentious about it, like, free. No, like, here, like, if you want to learn this, you can probably find my free videos on it or somebody else's. So being accessible to the community, I'm running a business, so at a certain point, people ask me questions. At a certain point, I have to say, hey, I do this for a living, because I have bills to pay just like you. Absolutely. But at the same time, like, still providing value. Even, you're going to have a lot of followers. Some of them, a small fraction are going to give you money, right? That's how it works. I have however many followers I have. It's a small fraction of that have actually paid me for something. But at the same time, I don't want to make it exclusive. I want to say, like, even if you have no intention of paying me something, I still want to provide value, because my intention is not, I have to make a living, of course, but my intention is not my sole or prime intention is not to make money. It's to help people in the inadequacies that I had to deal with when I was learning, so that they don't have to go through that, and to provide value. So I think that's really important. Is, yes, you're an entrepreneur. Yes, you have bills. Yes, you're trying to make money. If your number 1 priority is to make money from what you do, it's going to show. And I've seen a lot of people in the industry who went like, you can see the quality of their work decline so far because they're getting greedy. They're trying to go for all the money. And again, it depends on what you want to do. If you want, but eventually people are going to catch on if you're in it just for the money, or you're in it for actually providing value and helping others. And there's certain integrity that comes with it. Like, for me personally, there's a lot of information that gets regurgitated, so if I'm putting out the same information, I want to at least put a different spin, at least put a new perspective on it, at least try to get someone to think about it differently, so it's not just the same shit that people hear all the time. But yeah, this idea of
generic.
Yeah, provide value, provide perspective, don't have the expectation, but then make products too. So it's like, at the same time, right, if I only put out free stuff, people are going to take advantage of it. So you also have to draw that line and say, like, here's my free content. Here's the stuff you paid for. This is why it's a better value. It could be a number of reasons. And it's good to have that. What else as far as business lessons? Own your own shit. So that's like, if you're especially in the digital content, whatever you call it, intellectual property. I'm lucky to have exited certain parties when I have, but some people are going to be very picky on intellectual content, and the reality is that if they can afford better lawyers than you, they might have a better lawsuit, even if they're not necessarily right. So like, anything that you do, I think it's good to own it. It's good to not have it owned by another party, another platform, because you don't know, and if they stab you in the back, they now own your content, and they're making money from your stuff, which sucks. And I'm very lucky to not have run into that based on choices and decisions that I've made. Same thing with partnerships. I mean, I tend to be more of a loner for the most part, and there's good and bad. But at the same time, if you're entering an agreement or a business with a number of people, and then years later, the friendship you had becomes sour, anything like that, it becomes a really awkward way to split the business. And I've seen that happen in a lot of communities. I'm not saying to be alone, because there's a lot of benefit in having a team, but at the same time, just kind of think into the future, think a few years ahead, and then think worst case scenarios. So, and it's good. I remember reading as well, like, people who worry a lot tend to have a much higher level of intelligence. So at any given point, I'm not saying not to be optimistic, but I'm saying have a contingency for worst case scenarios. So what if, and this happened to me a bunch of times, and it happened to me at a time where I was getting too confident. I was in the middle of a tour, and it was a 7-week tour, and I had 3 weeks planned in the UK, and they don't let me into the UK. So 3 weeks of that tour, people paid for the workshops, I had this travel booked, it all got fucked because they didn't let me in. So I made it through, I made it happen. I made some things happen. I lost some money, but that's how it goes. But also just being able to think like, okay, what is, hopefully it never happens, but what is a worst case scenario? And in that way, you keep your integrity of providing quality to the, and it sucks, so I had to refund a bunch of people. The events didn't go through, their travel didn't go through, but just being aware of that the shit might happen, and you can learn from it if you treat it the right way.
Yeah, no, I think you actually it made me think of something earlier while you were talking about, don't be one of those people that just goes after the money, or don't make it all about the money. And I think that, like, even people with good intentions, sometimes what happens is it's actually what you said the latter half there, which was it's easy to get overconfident. When things are rolling, when you're killing it, when you're like booking stuff nonstop, whether it's workshops or culinary events, it feels like it'll never end. And then and it also, I think sometimes it's like you can be doing the same things and not getting the same result, right? It's not like, even with working out, right, or training, like you can be doing the same things and all of a sudden have it stop producing a result, not because you're doing anything wrong necessarily, but just because things shift. Like, that's just the nature of things. There's constantly shifts happening. So I know that I've
just
had it.
Luck. Right? Sometimes it's just you're in the right place at the right time, or the wrong time.
Right. And it just made me think, though, about how you were saying about people who, I don't think they may have been focused on money from the beginning, for sure, sometimes. But I think what happens a lot of times is when people get to a certain level of success, what happens is their lifestyle starts to reflect that success, right? And like, it could be as simple as something as buying a nice car. Nothing crazy. I'm not saying buy a Lamborghini, but people will buy a Mercedes, and then all of a sudden they got to make that $1,200 a month car payment, and then they're going to have to start hustling for $800 more than they were really making before because they had one good month. And as a result, they do shift a little bit of the importance to paying their bills, where before it was about the passion, it was about the artistry, it was about helping people. So I can totally understand what you were saying about that.
It's not easy. I know, like, I don't want to say I'm less interested in the training, but doing it as a business it was different when I trained just for myself. I trained because I love to train. I didn't care. I didn't have to take videos. I didn't have to create content. I just trained. And then starting to do it as a business, I still love it, but it's different because now I have to send a lot of emails, and now I have to do all this computer work, and it's like doing it, so it maybe do what you love, but maybe it's not for everyone to do it as a living, because it's like I haven't lost the passion, but it's a different passion because now it's not just about training. Now I have so many other things, and now I have to do all this business work. Now, in order to continue, I have to sit at the computer for a couple hours.
Yeah.
And when I was just training only to train, and I had a regular job, I didn't have to sit at the computer for a couple hours because of handstands. And there's nothing wrong with either. I'm really happy and really, really lucky to be able to do what I'm passionate about for a living. But at the same time, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. And it's
Amen.
Yeah, it's not always the idyllic lifestyle that you may think. Oh, you do what you love, because it's.
I always tell people, like, I think that the highs are a lot higher, and I don't want to say that the lows are lower, but the lows, like you said about being by yourself, you're definitely by yourself.
Yeah.
Like when you don't have paid vacation, and so like if you're taking a vacation, probably not getting paid. Like you were saying about traveling, that you're going these places, but you're not necessarily there for.
Yeah, so I don't even know how to take vacation because I've been traveling for work for 7 years. It's like, what do people even do? Like, they just go somewhere and they don't work? Like, how does that? I don't know how to do that.
Try to just tune and check out. So I definitely want to, put myself out there for anybody who, if something that, I talked about resonated with you today, always feel free, you can reach out to me through this channel, through my Facebook page. And we're going to do one more thing before we wrap up and ask Yuri if he's game. But if same for you, if you'd like to put anything out there for people to get in touch with you or with the services that you offer, how people can find you.
Yeah, you can go to my website, yuri-mar.com. You can look at my social medias. I do Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. I have some instructional content. I have a handstand ebook that I sell. I do in-person coaching, online coaching, seminars. Currently, I'm traveling a lot. I'm going to start doing more stuff in Vegas if you're around. But yeah, and you get me, right? So I don't have a team. So if you send an email to Yuri, some people say like, hey, Yuri's team, like, that's flattering. I'm the team. So you'll get me directly, but yeah, feel free to contact me. I try my best to respond within 24 hours.
And I'll make sure to tag you on wherever this gets posted, and I encourage you to do the same. So just to wrap up, if you're game, I'd love to just do a little handstand action with you and see if you can take me through, maybe some tips and however you can make my handstand better, or implement your perspective that you have, so people at home can see actually what you do.
Yeah, cool. So I'm gonna keep it simple, without getting too complex. So for this handstand, we're gonna look at the floor the whole time in between the hands because it's easier to balance. Step one is you're gonna put a bit of weight into the shoulders. So if I start here, my weight is in my feet, which means if I kick, I fall back. So what I want to do is put weight into my hands. And then really simple drill. You don't have to go up to handstand. That's not necessarily the point. It's about being able to hit that position easier and about being more aware of what you need to do to hit it. So I'm just going to kick and switch, right? Landing soft. So some people land a bit too far away from themselves and land heavy. So you want to land directly underneath your hip. Then the knee. You just gradually go higher, and what's happening is that as I go higher, my shoulders are starting to open into the overhead position. And right now I'm not doing it, I'm not trying to hit or hold the handstand. I'm just exploring what it is to put weight into the hands and go up. Nice.
Alright, so I'll just start all fours and you tell me where to move.
Yep. Elbows straight, shoulders on top of the hands, so shoulders go a bit more forward, good. And then, just kick and switch. Keep the legs straight for this one. Good, kicky leg. Good. Kick a little bit further. And now when you kick up, try to avoid sinking down into your shoulders. So imagine your arms are like a pillar. So this is really common, and especially because you already have some experience with handstands. So as you kick up, you're bending a little bit to get lower.
Okay.
But what's happening when you bend, there's no right or wrong.
Yeah.
When I bend, I have to use more muscle, and it's less bone structure. So I want to stay straight. So you want to keep the elbows. I usually cue the elbow pits to face each other. So this idea that when my elbows are straight, there's no drop in my shoulders, as opposed to something like that when I go up. And it's just details, but what it does is it takes away a potential variable, and then it also saves energy. Yeah. Okay. A little bit more relaxed kick. So the kick is not good. More elbows. More push. Good. Now try not to have, so the goal also, you don't want to have any forwards, sideways from camera. You don't want it for this, again, it's just details. We're trying not to go forwards and backwards with the shoulders.
I don't think it's just details. Everything is details.
Are already in the same place. So I don't have to go further forward because my weight's already in my arms.
Okay.
And then what that does is, it's just another variable.
Yeah.
If I go like this, it's an extra movement, and that movement doesn't actually help me to find my handstand faster. And then later, if we do like a press handstand, it's even more important.
So just the kick.
Yeah. Yeah. So try to keep the same weight on the hands the whole time. And you can land a little bit closer. The idea is the ground is hot lava for this one, so we're trying not to land and stop. We're trying to land and go right back up. Yep. Yeah. Good. So
looks easy. And I do a lot of handstands, so it's not easy.
This is different. And we're going to do one more variation of that.
Yeah.
So now we're going to kick and go legs together. Yeah. And again, it's not, the intention is not necessarily to hold the handstand. If you do, it's not a bad thing, but that's not the prime intention. Prime intention is consistency. So in this case, if we were an archer, this would be about, so aiming in archery doesn't mean shit if you can't shoot the same way. I've only done a little bit, but it was a really interesting article I read about how like, really good archers would do a few thousand shots at no target, just to ensure that they can shoot the same way before they try to aim. So that's what this drill is about. It's just about how do I hit the handstand so that when I try to balance, I don't waste energy and I can hit it the first time. So the same idea. I'm going to go this way so I don't kick the metal things. So now we're just going to have a moment of legs together. So we're going to go 1, 2. So shoulders are always in the same place in relation to the floor.
Really no other movement.
And again, I'm not trying to correct my balance here. It's just about being accurate enough with the kick. So same movement. We just have a moment. 1 second, 2 seconds. Wow, but legs together. Yeah. So it's not it's a switch, and make that legs together really clear. Okay. So it's very clear that there was a moment that the legs were contacting each other. Yep. Good. Breathing. And straight legs in the air for this one. Good.
Another set. I like this. Good drill.
Yeah, and if you do enough, it's even a cardio.
Right? Nice.
Yeah. But it's all just details. It's a skill. Hand balancing, it's a skill like anything else. So, and then how precise you want to be, it's up to you. Like, again, I might be training someone who doesn't, they just want to do a handstand. They don't give a shit if their toes are pointed. And then I might be training someone who's trying to get into circ. So it's also good to understand kind of what kind of standards you want to have. Nothing wrong with either. It's good not to settle for low standards, but at the same time, like, be realistic. If I'm not a competitive gymnast, do I need it to look like a certain way? Maybe over long term, it's a good goal to have. But it's, this idea of coming back to the childlike state. Like, just exploring, we're just doing a handstand. And as we get better, we can be aware of more details.
Nice. Any other thoughts you want to share before we wrap up?
I had another thought and then I lost it. Thoughts are fleeting. I think it was about the business. Nah, it'll come back to me, but it's lost now.
We'll do a follow-up. Well, I hope everybody at home enjoyed watching this today. This is basically the new version of the Upgrade Human Performance podcast. You can find more at Chef Kaz, everything, Upgrade Human Performance, everything, because I'm going to be featuring different people, movement artists, chefs, business people, science people, artists. I'm just trying to really give exposure for people who I think are creating awesome things and doing awesome things in the world, because I think it's not only recognizing what they're doing and the impact it's having, but one, how they got there, and then two, the lessons that really can be taken and applied across pretty much anything. And I think that whether we're talking handstands, archery, cooking, capoeira, it's so cool how so many lessons are exactly the same. And then, going back to, in capoeira we would say first chord, it'd be like your first belt in other martial arts, just being that complete novice again and being, like the learning process.
And even within, capoeira is a good example, but even within something you already think you understand, like when I teach handstand seminars, I still learn new things about handstands. Even though I understand it to some degree, there's still things that I didn't think about. People surprised. And same thing with capoeira. Like, sometimes a movement that I've been doing for 10 years gets explained to me in a different way, and it's like, well, I thought I understood that movement, and now I realize I'm a white belt again, or I'm a green belt, whatever belt, with that movement. So even within a discipline that you already have experience in, you can still apply that.
Yeah, I love it. All right, buddy. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Great having you, and we'll see you guys next time. Hope you've enjoyed. Please share, comment, like, post, all that good stuff. And we'll see you guys next time. Kaz out.